Hey YouTube, it's another perfect day in God's country, and I ain't lying. Listen, I got to make this video standing up this morning, full-fledged Stavely style. It just makes me feel high energy and more involved with what I'm doing here. So it's another perfect day in God's country, and I ain't lying. So thank you to each and every one of you for taking yet another moment out of your day to hang out with me, Lucky Haskins, as I do my very best to explain to everybody and the masses how they intentionally taught, how our education system, our schooling system, like a friend of mine chimed in and said, I'm careful to never let my schooling get in the way of my education. A quote from Mark Twain, ironically. Eh? Thank you for that one, my man. I want to just show you guys clearly and poignantly and very simply and easily how theoretical science, mostly being the culprit, and of course the mandatory component of this, how they intentionally and deliberately use the education system and have used the education system as a propaganda tool to teach people not to think, to absolutely train the human mind to not be able to think for itself. And I'm going to say something here that I've said many times over the years, and it often gets misunderstood, because there are many, many important truths. When you hear it come out of my mouth and I say the globe Earth, the heliocentric model, and the truth about this flat and motionless plane that we live on in this realm we find ourselves in that lies within the waters, the 6 known continents, right, 6 continents divided into numerous countries, this huge illusion that it's all not run by the same people, okay? All of this, it's all hidden by the globe Earth. It is fundamentally the foundation for all of the deception that we have been under since the late 1800s. All of it. The globe is the most brilliant, genius piece of propaganda I've certainly ever witnessed in my lifetime. And I think that very few people can wrap their head around why I say that, okay? It doesn't mean it's the most important truth. No, they're killing kids. I know, man. The world is full of important truths. What I'm always trying to say in regards to this is that everything that we are witnessing out our window is under the umbrella of the delusion of the globe Earth and how it simply hid everything quickly and easily. And I'm going to give you an example straight out of the heliocentric model that can be applied across the board, across the sciences. I mean, you can look at germ theory. Well, germ theory, we know Louis Pasteur proved that if you don't wash your hands, someone's going to get sick when you're operating on them. Sick? Or do they get an infection? Was that proof of a germ or evidence of a contaminant? Okay, I just want to point out the simple ways of the delusions. It's across the board. Theoretical science was never science to begin with. It's this truth with lies mixture and the process of compartmentalization that they snuck in beginning in the late 1800s. We have to look at the timelines, folks. Look at the timelines. For those of you who don't think that, oh, this globe Earth is absolutely the foundation of everything, it hid it all beautifully, tucked us onto these 5 continents. They divided it up into countries and said, oh, we all hate each other, so that they can absolutely get us to line up and shoot at each other by simply sending a signal into our homes and convincing us that we need to go line up and kill these other people. And we all think that those people are against us. That's what the masses think. And those who are more well educated understand This is one group of people manipulating a large group of people that are basically imprisoned on 5 known continents, and it is what it is. And it's brilliant. The globe Earth deception was brilliant. So it is, in Lucky's mind, the absolute foundation for how they laid this out. Now let's focus on this timeline, these late 1800s. Lots of mysterious stuff happening, right? The big people begin to vanish. There was about 10% of the population on all 5 of the known continents that were 7 to 10 feet tall. 10% showing up in the census even. And of course, now we have thousands and thousands of photographic evidence of these people. Even into the early 1900s, these large people were living right here in Calumet, Michigan, near me. And then, of course, as we know, for those of you who have studied history a little bit more intently, by 1910 or 1920, there was no more of these folks. Hey, sorry about that, y'all. My mouth's getting a little dry. I'm going to open a Dr. Pepper here. Anyway, I don't want to ramble too far, but let's look at these timelines. For those of you who followed my channel, I told you guys one time before, this is because Lucky understands that nothing goes out. The most important weapon of the people who run this shit show is information. That's it. Guns, cannons, flamethrowers, none of it even measures up to the control of information. This is why in the movie They Live, the guy saved the world by taking down the tower. That was the metaphor. Radiation, okay? Radiation. That's what the signals are that come into our house. Radio, a lot of people don't understand. Radio towers. They changed the name to radio because they figured radiation was a little harsh. Those are called radiation towers. They send out radioactive signals to your home. Then they proceed to tell you what to think and who to hate, and that yet another country's coming for you, man. They're coming for your freedoms. Here they come. Load your shit. Let's go kill some other folks. All of us are in the same boat unless you're of the adept, okay? So I realize I'm a little all over the map here. I want to lay out this timeline for you. For those of you who followed this channel for a while, you might remember me saying it's very weird that the Michelson-Morley experiment even happened and that they would release that information upon the public. Because if you've been doing this long enough, you understand that they control every single little tidbit of information. If they don't want you to have it, you ain't gonna get it. If you do get it, they want you to have it. When they tell you that aliens crashed in Roswell and then, oh, no, they didn't, never mind, they want you to think that aliens crashed in Roswell. Guess what? It works. People are that far gone. It's always worked, folks, and I don't understand why in 2026 people still turn to the radioactivity coming into their house to be told what to think and how to act. It's insane. But that's the world we live in on the 5 continents that lie within the waters in this realm we find ourselves living in. The known 5 continents. I'm sorry, 6 continents. I apologize. A little fired up this morning. So if we look at the timelines, well, Lucky told you guys a year ago, 2 years ago, I think they released the Michelson-Morley experiments because they knew they were going to start flying people around in in combustion powered aircraft, and people would simply go, obviously it's not a globe, obviously it's not in motion, that's horseshit. So they had to release Michelson-Morley so then they could have this character named Einstein tell you, yeah, but space and time is warped, man. You're never going to be able to notice that you're moving and you're on a ball. You'll never be able to prove it. Space and time is warped. You'll never get an accurate measurement because space and time is warped. You dumb idiot humans. Oh, okay, cool. Now, if you understand the timeline of Michelson Morley, then you start to combine that with what we're learning now. What was also going up in that same time period of the late 1800s? The insane asylums. The insane asylums that were built big enough to house 10 to 20% of the local population. In some instances, they were built in locations where they could house more than the local population itself. I myself lived near one of those facilities, lived near several of those facilities growing up because they hadn't tore them all down yet. They were starting to. Hillcrest, by the way, in Howell, excellent example. When that was built, there was no population out there, a bunch of farmers. Okay? Well, what was happening in the late 1800s as we're moving into this new thing? They were trying to convince people they lived on a globe. Oh, here goes Lucky again, saying the globe's the foundation of it all. Well, of course it is, folks. The emperor wears no clothes. Think about it. Okay? So what's going on in the late 1800s? They're deciding they're going to tell everybody it's a globe. At the same time, they're building massive insane asylums all over the place. Why is that, folks? Well, you can't have people telling their kids, we don't live on a ball, an accidental spinning space rock flying through an infinite universe. This is horseshit designed to warp your mind and make you comply with nonsense, okay? They couldn't have elderly folks walking around trying to disrupt the narrative being portrayed to the young folks. Look at the timelines, folks. We do know that Miss Ruth, y'all remember Ruth? 1903, she was still taught in Southern America that the earth was flat and motionless. Now let's look at other details. What happens now a lot of truthers like to go, oh, in 1958, I've said this before, in the encyclopedia in 1958, it showed the firmament coming down in Antarctica. They talked about the height. They said they measured it at 16 or 18,000 feet just off the coast of Antarctica. The encyclopedias published by the same folks that put this shit show together. What were they doing putting the firmament in there? Well, folks, they were putting the firmament in there probably to make everybody think there's nothing past Antarctica. Then they simply changed the narrative and said, screw that, we're in the infinite universe. Anyhow, just giving you my thoughts on that. But I want to point out the timelines and like what I told you guys about Michelson Morley. They couldn't put everybody in planes, folks, and start flying all over this globe without coming up with some kind of magic trick to make people be able to look out the frickin' window and fall for this globe earth deception. Okay? So I'm just pointing out how huge I think the globe earth deception is and the purpose of it. And I'm telling you, it sure fits the timeline with all of these large facilities. And a lot of these channels pushing a lot of this Tartaria stuff and a lot of the old world stuff, now that it's coming out, are going to be COINTEL. I hope you guys, have your smell tester ready enough for that. Always be aware of that. Of course, that movement is going to be owned and controlled. Use your own brain, keep both boots on the ground. If it's not demonstrable, you know the drill, folks. Just remember I told you that a lot of that stuff is going to be COINTEL. The larger channels, very likely owned and controlled. One thing I haven't heard any of them mention regarding the large mental institutions would be that exact timeline as they're exploding this globe onto society. For anyone who has studied this globe earth deception, you know that it popped up in the late 1800s. Sure, there's lots of history written by AI to provide the backstories. Speaking of backstories, let's get right down to the point of this video. I want to give you the very best example of how they can teach human beings not to think and to follow along with a narrative that is incorrect. And that is, folks, the old Eratosthenes experiment, as they call it, or the measuring of the shadows, which people now, students that are at high levels in college, will still open their mouth and say, well, Eratosthenes proved the globe. That is the best example you can possibly give anyone interested in learning about indoctrination of how theoretical horseshit science and agenda-based social engineering can train the human mind to follow a narrative, and somehow the mind wants there to be proof, and it will latch on and say it was proven because somebody told them that some old experiment proved it. They cannot form the critical thoughts needed to understand what that experiment even was and how they're being manipulated. They would rather just absorb what they were told and believe it as truth. There is no better example than the Eratosthenes and how it's still used to this day. I've heard people say that students still go out and do this. Now, you want to talk about some horseshit manipulation of the human mind, that's it right there, okay? Eratosthenes wasn't even trying to prove the earth was a globe, for those of you who don't know. He was trying to measure a proposed hypothetical globe. However, we know that Eratosthenes didn't even exist. We know that all the history's fake and made up, but it doesn't matter. It's still all laid out for anyone to examine, still apparently used to this day. And they simply tell people, hey, the sun is this far away, and here's some shadows, proves it's a globe. Nobody has the common sense to ask, how do we know how far away the sun is? Now, some people will go as far as to tell you they've measured the distance to the sun. Nothing could be further from the truth. They don't know how far the sun is. They don't know how big the sun is. They don't know what the sun even is. Folks, okay? The sun and the distance to the sun, the distance that you're told the sun is a proposed distance to suit a model, a hypothesis. For the earth to be a globe, for the heliocentric model to work at all, the sun has to be at this distance, which 93 million miles away is the current proposed distance, which changes every few years because it's simply a theoretical, hypothetical proposed distance. Therefore, you can't use a theoretical, hypothetical, proposed distance that suits a model to verify that model. This is kindergarten logic 101. Everybody should understand this, yet the human mind has been meticulously groomed and trained to fall for that kind of circular rhetoric and absolutely use their own failures of their own mind as proof and to solidify their belief in theoretical mathematics that doesn't even fit reality. It's not even close. Okay? That's why I always talk about the importance of the globe Earth. Very few can wrap their heads around how the globe Earth was used to create the deception we find ourselves in this little 150-year ride that we've been taken on. Okay? I say the most likely reason people were locked up in those homes was these were people that just didn't want to accept the hypothesis of the globe Earth and the theoretical rhetoric that this new plan, this new world order, had to offer society through its propaganda channels, the newspapers, blah, 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 blah. Okay? The very first thing they did when they released live movies, the very first people to make motion pictures, universal images with the image of the globe. Okay, that's, I mean, people just can't see it because we're 8, 9, 10 generations into this Ponzi scheme and this disgusting indoctrination process. Um, you know, in the end, I mean, you can look at it a lot of ways. I remember an episode many years ago. Matt from Quantum of Conscience said, he lives in a more populated area than me, but I've been in many populated areas. And he said, you ever just sit at a traffic light and watch all the people going by in every direction? Everybody's on a mission. Everybody's going somewhere. They all got their blank faces they're wearing. And he pointed out, he's like, what a shit show that these elite, the not nilk, as he calls it, has created. But somehow it's working. Like, watch all these people. Like, it's working. They're all on a mission. They're all going somewhere. They're all doing something, man. I guess only the most advanced researchers finally figure out it's all about something to do with energy creation, right? I mean, it's, of course, we're being manipulated and used like caged rats. But at any rate, folks, I just wanted to kind of chime in about that and give a more detailed example of how people were intentionally placed into a state of psychosis. Another friend of this channel had said, is that a little harsh saying they're in a state of psychosis? Well, no. And we talked about it, and I think he understands where I'm coming from now. It is a state of psychosis. That means living in a false reality. Now, just because a large percentage of the population is living in that same state of psychosis doesn't make it not psychosis. It's still psychosis, 100%. It's just by design. And they knew they could place the society into a state of psychosis. They knew they would latch on to the radioactive signals coming into their home, and that would become their lives. And folks, did it ever work? But I'll say it again, don't forget, in the movie They Live, very clear, very poignant metaphor. He saved humanity by taking down the tower. Turn off the radioactivity. As long as people think that the radioactive signals coming into their home are giving them some form of reality, that they're teaching, look at the Cold War, folks. We now know that nuclear weapons are 100% fake, but they used it on people for, 20 years, scared the shit out of people. They let people spend tons of money on bomb shelters and survival gear and blah, blah, blah for something that doesn't exist. I mean, on and on and on it goes, folks. So if you guys don't think that these psychopaths are sick enough that they just I understand now where all the history comes from. Every time these folks are releasing another super corrupt, making another super corrupt move that people could be hung publicly for, that their crimes are so disgusting, they simply have AI start fabricating the backstories, folks. There's always backstories. It's just a brilliant system of deception. And these last 150 years were easily propelled into high gear through the use of the heliocentric model. Who is the god Helios? The guardian of the oath. It's not rocket science, folks, okay? But yeah, that's, they told us in They Live, take down the radioactivity and humanity's restored, okay? But unfortunately, humanity's a little far gone. So anyway, I hope I help explain a little bit today how the education system, how all theoretical science gets explained to people as if they've somehow proven their own belief after they reify it. It's just simply brilliant trickery, folks, and has really worked well. And just like Rockefeller said, he got exactly what he asked for. I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers. He got that in spades. We all know it's coming to an end, and they no longer need a nation of workers either. So where it goes from here, folks, ain't much we can do other than grab a wobble pop, kick back in our favorite recliner, and watch the shit show. I don't know what else we can do other than ask ourselves, who can I help today, and go out there and do it.